Look at her again, always fighting, always stealing, always causing trouble, no respect at all." The words drifted over the hibiscus hedge like toxic smoke. Amaara stood in the shadows of her father's expansive porch, her knuckles bruised from a scuffle at the village stream earlier that morning. She was 17, but her eyes held the weary cynicism of a woman of 50. "Isn't she Chief's only daughter?" another voice whispered, thick with the judgmental honey of village gossip. "With all that money, private schools, big cars, and this is how she behaves? Useless child. A complete disgrace to her father's name. If it were my daughter, I would have handed her over to the masquerade to discipline." Amaara heard these words almost every single day of her teenage life. In the quiet but gossip-loving village of Omuluo, everyone knew Amaara, but almost nobody truly knew her story. To the village, she was a thief. To the teachers, she was a bully. To the elders, she was wild, shameless, and spoiled. And worst of all, they said she was the black sheep staining the golden name of the richest man in 7 villages combined. Chief was more than wealthy. He was a force of nature. He owned over 200 plots of land across 3 local governments. He had 12 petrol stations, 3 blocks of shops in Onitsha main market, and a fleet of 25 tipper trucks that rumbled through the dusty roads of the mainland like a private army. He had built the only story-building secondary school in the community and named it after his late father. When Chief spoke at village meetings, the air seemed to grow still. Even the oldest men, the Ozo title holders, kept quiet until he finished. From the outside, Amaara lived like a princess in a fairy tale. The mansion was a massive duplex with marble floors that felt like ice underfoot and chandeliers imported from Dubai that cast long, distorted shadows on the walls. She had a personal driver who took her to and from the best private school in the mainland every day. She had iPhones before most village adults had even seen a smartphone. She had designer bags and enough pocket money that other children thought she was mocking them when she said she had only 5,000 shilling for lunch. Amaara's mother Lola had been the heartbeat of that house. She was the one who filled the marble halls with the smell of toasted bread and the sound of laughter. But cancer is no respecter of wealth. When Amaara was 6 years and 6 months old, she watched the light go out of her mother's eyes. She remembered the day with haunting clarity, her mother's frail, skeletal hand on her cheek, whispering, "My baby, be strong for daddy, okay? You are the glue." 2 days later, the glue dissolved. After the burial, the big house became a museum of silence. Chief never cried in public. He never cried in private either, at least not where anyone could see. He believed the best way to honor his late wife was to build a monument of success so high that no one could see the cracks in his foundation. To him, Amaara was no longer a little girl who needed hugs. She became a project, a legacy carrier, a reflection of his brand. Amaara tried everything a child could try to bridge the distance. In primary 4, she stayed up late by the light of a rechargeable lamp, studying until her eyes ached. She came first in her class and ran to her father's study, waving the report card. He glanced at it for 3 seconds, his eyes already drifting back to his spreadsheet. "Good," he said, his voice flat. "That is what is expected. Don't let it get to your head. Now, go. I have a call with the governor." In GSS 1, she joined the debating society. She practiced her speeches in front of the mirror for weeks. She won the zonal competition, her heart thumping with a rare spark of joy. She came home clutching a shining gold trophy, but Chief was in Abuja for a party caucus. He sent his driver to collect the trophy from her. It was placed in a storage room behind some old tires and forgotten for 3 years. The realization began to sink in. Excellence was ignored. It was expected like the sunrise and therefore invisible. So Amaara changed tactics. If excellence wouldn't make him look at her, perhaps chaos would. When she was 12, she deliberately failed her mathematics exam. She waited for the explosion, the lecture, even a scolding, anything that required him to acknowledge her existence. He didn't even attend the parents' meeting. The principal called him and Chief simply sent a bank transfer of 50,000 shilling for the school's development fund and instructed the teachers to discipline her properly. The more invisible she felt, the louder she became. At 13, she slapped a classmate who called her the orphan princess. At 14, she pushed a senior girl down the stairs after the girl mocked her mother's death. Each suspension was a scream for help that the world translated as a tantrum. By 15, she started taking things. She didn't need the money, she had plenty, but she stole phones, earpieces, and textbooks. There was a dark, hollow thrill in being caught. When the teachers shouted her name in anger, at least they were seeing her. When the village elders wagged their fingers at her, she felt a perverse sense of power. Negative attention was still attention, and to a hard soul, even poisoned bread looks like a feast. The village gave her labels, and like a soldier going to war, Amaara wore them like armor. Chief's daughter is a confirmed thief. She beats people like a tout. That girl will spoil her father's good name. The church members held special deliverance sessions for her, praying against the spirit of rebellion and maternal abandonment. But in all those years, not one single adult, not a teacher, not a priest, not an auntie, ever sat her down, looked into her eyes and asked, "Amaara, where does it hurt?" Instead, Chief relied on the only tool he understood, force. He used heavy leather belts. He used his open palms. He locked her in her room for days with nothing but a gallon of water and a loaf of bread. He tried public shaming, dragging her to the front of the extended family during the Christmas festival to apologize for her sins. One evening, after she was caught with a necklace to belong to the vice principal's wife, Chief reached his breaking point. He didn't hit her this time. He just looked at her with a cold, clinical disgust that was worse than any whip. "You are a disgrace to the blood in your veins," he whispered. "Sometimes I wish your mother had taken you with her when she died. I wish I had remained childless than to have a parasite like you." Amaara was 16. Something inside her chest didn't just break, it turned to ash. That was the night she stopped crying. She realized that the man standing before her wasn't her father. He was a stranger who owned the house she lived in. "If the whole world say I am a monster," she whispered to her reflection that night, "then I will show them what a monster truly looks like." The final blow came in her second year of senior secondary school, SS2. The school bursar's office was boggled during a blackout. Over 2 million shilling in cash, money for PTA dues, school fees, and the inter-house sports festival was gone. Because Amaara had been seen near the administrative block the evening before, the verdict was instantaneous. There was no trial, no investigation. Her reputation acted as the judge, jury, and executioner. The principal called Chief at dinner time. By 8:30 p.m., the headlights of his black G-Wagon sliced through the school gates. He walked into the office, his presence suffocating the room. He didn't ask Amaara if she did it. He didn't ask for evidence. He looked at the principal and said, "I am tired of paying for her sins." He turned to Amaara. "This girl is no longer my daughter. From this moment, she ceases to bear the name. She is a stranger to my house, my testament, and my life. Let her go and live the street life she has chosen." He turned on his heel and walked out. The roar of his engine fading into the distance was the last thing Amaara heard of her old life. The school, fearing the chief's wrath if they kept her, told her to leave immediately. Amaara stood in the principal's office, her uniform rumpled, her heart a cold stone. Nobody comforted her. Even the security man who used to sneak her extra biscuits when she looked sad, looked away as she passed. That night, she went to the dormitory, packed a small traveling bag with 2 changes of clothes, her mother's faded photograph, a diary she had kept since primary 5, and the small amount of cash she had saved. She walked out of the school gates at 11:47 p.m. She walked past the big house in the mainlands, the house with the marble floors and the Dubai chandeliers. She didn't look back. No one followed her. No one called her name. The next morning, the village was alive with the sweetest gossip in years. They talked about it at the market, at the palm wine shacks, and in the church pews. "Chief has finally cleaned his house," they said. "Good riddance to bad rubbish." The city of Nairobi was not a fairy tale. It was a grinding machine of noise, smoke, and desperation. For a girl who grew up with a driver and a silver spoon, the streets were a brutal education. Landlords laughed at her when she tried to rent a room. She had no ID, no references, and no money. She spent her first 3 weeks sleeping in an uncompleted building near the local London Bridge, curled up on a cement bag, clutching her mother's photograph to her chest. She learned what true hunger felt like, the kind that makes your stomach feel like it's eating itself. She ate from dustbins twice, weeping with shame as she swallowed scraps of stale bread. She bathed at public taps at 3 a.m. before the city awoke. Worst of all were the people who recognized her. Occasionally, someone from the mainland would see her at the motor park. Is this not Chief's daughter? Look at you now. Where are the iPhones? Where is the pride? She learned to harden her face. She sold sachet water in the scorching sun. She sold recharge cards. She scrubbed floors in beer parlors for a plate of jollof rice. For 2 years, she was a ghost in the city. But the fire that had once made her troublesome was now the only thing keeping her alive. In her 3rd year on the streets, Amaara met Madame Ngozi. Madame Ngozi ran a chaotic, high-traffic restaurant near the Upper Westlands flyover. She was a woman built like a fortress, with a voice that could drown out a truck engine. Amaara showed up one morning asking for work, not money, just work. Madame Ngozi watched her for a week. She noticed that while other girls slacked off, Amaara scrubbed the pots until they shone like mirrors. She noticed that even when Amaara was clearly fainting from hunger, she never touched a piece of meat from the pot without permission. A rainy evening after the last customer had left, Madame Ngozi sat Amaara down. "Child," she said, her voice unusually soft. "You have the eyes of someone who came from somewhere important, but the hands of someone who has seen hell. What really happened to you?" The dam broke. For the first time in nearly a decade, Amaara told the truth. She told her about the silence of the marble house, the trophy in the storeroom, the false accusation, and the father who wished she were dead. Madame Ngozi didn't offer pity. She offered a perspective Amaara had never heard. "Listen to me, Amaara. You were not a bad child. You were a hurt child. And a hurt child will burn down a village just to feel the warmth of the fire. But you are a woman now. You can keep burning things down, or you can use that fire to cook something that feeds the world." Madame Ngozi gave her a small room at the back of the restaurant. It had a leaky roof and a thin mattress, but it had a door that locked. For Amaara, it was a palace. Under Madame Ngozi's wing, Amaara found a path. Ngozi introduced her to a youth empowerment NGO called Second Chance Initiative. Amaara enrolled in their vocational training. The same stubbornness that once made her fight classmates now became the determination to master every skill. The same boldness that had been labeled shameless now made her the best public speaker in the leadership classes. She discovered she had a genius for organization. She learned catering, but she didn't stop there. She learned event management. She learned how to use social media to market small businesses. She saved every cent, living on beans and gari while she built a dream. At 25, Amaara launched Amaara's Signature, a small food delivery service. She started with a single gas burner and a bicycle. She targeted the bank workers and office clerks who didn't have time to go to the market. She hired 2 girls who had been kicked out of their homes, girls the village would have called troublesome. By 30, Amaara's Signature had become a household name in the Westlands and Upper Hills. She won contracts to cater for government functions and corporate retreats. She built a state-of-the-art event center and named it the Lola Hope Center, in memory of her mother. She never used her surname for business. She never asked for a cent from her father's estate. Every brick of her success was laid with her own calloused hands. While Amaara was rising, the legendary chief was crumbling. Time and stress had done what his enemies couldn't. A stroke had left his right side paralyzed, and diabetes was slowly stealing his vision. The massive house in the mainlands was now a tomb. His so-called loyal associates had vanished once the contract stopped flowing. His nephews and cousins hovered around like vultures, whispering about his will while he was still breathing. One afternoon, the chief was sitting in his wheelchair listening to the local radio. A program came on featuring the top 10 entrepreneurs under 40 in Africa. The host's voice crackled through the speakers. "Today we are joined by the CEO of Amaara's Signature and founder of the Lola Hope Foundation. She has just been awarded the National Merit Award for Youth Development. Her story of rising from the streets of Onitsha to becoming a titan of industry is an inspiration to us all." Chief froze. The name, the voice, it was the same voice that used to scream for his attention, now matured into a melody of confidence and grace. He didn't speak for 3 days. On the 4th day, he called his lawyer. "Find her," he whispered, "and tell her Tell her I am not asking for a daughter. I am asking for a priest to hear my confession." Amaara received the message during a board meeting. She didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She simply looked out the window at the city that had once tried to swallow her whole. She waited 2 weeks before going. She wanted to ensure her heart was steady. She drove into the mainland in a white SUV, a symbol of the purity and strength she had found in the dirt. The village people gathered at the gates of the mansion, their eyes wide. They remembered the tout, the thief, the disgrace. They saw a woman who moved with the quiet authority of a queen. She found her father on the veranda. He looked small. The man who had once made the village tremble was now just a frail elder dwarfed by his own wheelchair. They stared at each other for a long, heavy minute. The silence of 20 years sat between them. "I heard you on the radio," he finally said, his voice a ragged shadow of his former self. Amaara nodded. "I read about what you do for those girls, the ones society has thrown away." Amaara remained silent, her face a mask of calm. Then the chief's eyes filled with water. A man who built empires but couldn't build a bridge to his own child finally broke. "I wished you were never born, and that is the heaviest burden I carry. Can you ever forgive a man who was so rich he became a beggar in his own soul?" Amaara looked at him. She saw the man who hurt her, but she also saw a human being facing the end of his life with nothing but regret. "I forgave you long ago, Daddy. If I hadn't, I would have stayed the girl who stole phones. I had to forgive you to become the woman who feeds hundreds." She took his hand. "I wasn't a bad child. I was a lonely child. And you weren't a bad man. You were a grieving man who didn't know how to cry." Amaara didn't move back into the mansion, but she transformed it. Part of it became a branch of her foundation, a place where troublesome children from the surrounding villages could find counseling, art, and love. Chief lived for 3 more years. They were the best years of his life. He spent them listening to Amaara's stories, meeting the girls she helped, and learning how to be a father to a woman who no longer needed his money, only his heart.